Welcome to Laying the Points with FarleyBets. This is episode, 4? I think it's 4. It's 4 or 5. Pretty sure it's 4. This is the NBA Eastern Conference playoff preview where I will give you all what I think are the chances that each of the 8 NBA teams in the Eastern Conference will make the finals. I'm not really counting the play-in tournament teams at 9 and 10. I don't think they're going to get very far. I'll touch upon them. But I think the 8 teams that we see in the 8 spots now are going to be those 8 teams. I think the Wizards and Celtics will switch spots tonight, and the Wizards will end up in the 7th seed. But anyway, you can always view these podcasts, listen to these podcasts, I should say, on all your podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts. So look for the Odds Breakers umbrella of podcasts, and you will see this Laying the Points episode along with all the other Laying the Points that I've done thus far. My name is Chris R. Farley, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at FarleyBets. On Twitter, my actual handle is at Chris R. Farley1, but if you search FarleyBets, you should be able to find me there. Please give me a follow and tell your friends, if you haven't already, about our great season that we've had in the NBA. I am 207 and 152 on the regular season in NBA betting. That is a 58% win rate. According to those sharp bettors and those, bosses of the sports betting world, you can't get a much better NBA season than that. Apparently, it's one of the better seasons some of those sharp sports bettors have seen. So I tried to tell you guys, I've been on the scene for a little while. I've been doing this a little while, over 10 years, but this is really the first year where I'm, decided to share my thoughts and to do some writing. And I got lucky to work at the Odds Breakers with Kiev, which I'm so extremely grateful for all the time, every day, because I love providing picks for all of you and seeing you all win. So 58% in the NBA this year, not too shabby. Hoping to continue that win rate in the playoffs as well. So I think I said it all. Check out my articles at theoddsbreakers.com. They're available every day at the Odds Breakers. I do write on baseball as well. We're doing pretty good. We're still over the 50% mark, but we're not quite where we want to be. Of course, as the NBA season ends, I'll be able to completely focus on baseball, and that'll be nice. So I expect the overall record to climb there. With that being said, let's get to the podcast because I have a lot to cover. This goes for almost an hour as we discuss the Eastern Conference playoffs and the teams and their chances of making the finals. Now, before I start this playoff preview, I just wanted to say something really quick that I forgot to say before, and that's this. First of all, I have to thank all of you who read my NBA articles at the Odds Breakers. My NBA articles have been one of the most viewed and read, if not the most viewed page on the Odds Breakers consistently now for quite a few weeks now. So I just wanted to thank all of you for making that happen. I share them on Twitter, I share them on Instagram, and you visit the page and you take in my picks, and mostly I get really positive feedback from all of you. Always open to constructive criticism. I'm not open to trolling, which there are plenty of trolls out there, but whatever, that comes with the gig. It's fine. It comes with the Twitterverse. Everybody thinks they know what they're talking about. But thank you so much for all your support at the Odds Breakers. And I also wanted to say this game is so weird. I mean, this is my first year actually putting my picks and my analysis out there, although I've been doing this for such a long time. Over 10 years. But just since it is my first year kind of out there on the block and in the public sphere, you kind of have to boast about what you've done. So when I talk about the 58%, that is a really strong number. It is what it is. I mean, it speaks for itself. I hope it doesn't sound too braggadocious, but you kind of have to let people know, right? You kind of have to be a little bit of a LeBron James and be like, hey, I'm one of the best ever. Well, I don't know if I'm one of the best ever, but I've had a great damn season in the NBA, and if I don't let you know about it, then who will? As I get my name out there and I continue to build FarleyBets and the Odds Breakers. So just throwing that out there, I'm not an egotistical prick, but you kind of have to talk about this shit, especially in sports betting. You gotta let them know. Anyway, with that, let's move on to this playoff preview. So there are 10 teams that could potentially, well, there are 6 teams that are absolutely going to be in the playoffs, and then there are 4 teams who are in the play-in tournament in each conference. 2 of those teams will survive, and then, as usual, we'll have our 8 teams in each conference to enter the NBA playoffs. I've said it before, I'm not a huge fan of the play-in tournament because I think it already devalues, it further devalues a regular season that's already not taken very seriously by a lot of NBA teams. I would think and I would hope that seeding and being one of the best teams in your conference is still important. But the play-in tournament allows you to be, in that 10th spot and to still get into the playoffs and make some moves. So it's exciting. It has a little bit of a college basketball tournament feel, and maybe that's what they're trying to do because people love that in college hoops. But hey, it gives us more games to wager on too. I'll say this from the get-go. I don't think either the Hornets or the Pacers, who are 10th and 9th in the play-in tournament, I don't think they're going to make it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the Hornets and the Pacers here. I think they each have a 0% chance of making the finals. I think they're both good, solid, mid-tier teams. But I don't even think that they're going to make the top 8. I think the Wizards are going to win tonight. So a little preview of my picks that I was going to say for the end. But I do think the Wizards will dethrone the Celtics tonight. And then the Celtics will face the winner of the 9th and 10th seed. And I do think the Celtics will be able to pull that one out. They still have more playoff experience, more skilled players, and a deeper roster than the other 2 teams. I mean, the Pacers are so hurt. Sabonis is still banged up. Bogdan is still banged up. Miles Turner's out. So, there's, you can look at the injury report, but they're not entirely healthy. The Hornets are healthier, but the Hornets are not a great team. They're a mid-tier team, a good team at best. We saw what the Wizards did to them on Sunday. The Wizards were down double digits, like 12, 13 points at certain points in the third quarter. And the Wizards were just able to turn on the Jets and overcome the Hornets' lead, and they actually almost covered that game. So I think that kind of speaks to how good the Wizards have looked and how mid-tier and probably undeserving of a playoff spot the Hornets are. They're a good team. They're a good young team. I'm not trying to hate on the Hornets, but I don't think they have any chance of going to the finals, and I don't even think they're going to make it past the play-in tournament. So with that, let's start with the Boston Celtics, who are the 7th seed, who I think will end up being the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference NBA playoffs. So the Boston Celtics. The Celtics are one of the most volatile and frustrating teams all year. I know that from experience. I've bet on them in great spots, and I've seen them blow it over and over and over again. They have no Jaylen Brown anymore. Got injured a few weeks back. He's out for the year. And that's going to make a big difference. It already has made a big difference. That means more pressure on Jason Tatum, more pressure on Kemba Walker and Marcus Smart and others to step up. Can they do that? Can they step up in a big way in the playoffs, and can the Celtics make waves? I don't think so, personally. They dropped 5 of their last 6 games to end the season, twice to the Heat, to the Bulls, the Cavs, and the Knicks. Bulls and the Cavs, not a great look. Heat and the Knicks, guess you can understand it, but 5 of the last 6, ending the season cold. They're 16th in points per game, 11th in points allowed. Their defense has definitely improved as the year waned on, but towards the end they didn't have much of a defense at all. 13th in point differential. They're 11th in offensive efficiency and 15th in defensive efficiency. So that stat used to be way lower, and it shows the improvement from Boston towards the end of the year on defense. Another stat that stands out is they're 5th in offensive rebounding, which is pretty impressive considering how small they are. But they really don't do much else very well. They don't really stand out. They're not like astounding in any other way. Jason Tatum is averaging 26.4 points per game, and he really needs to because he's going to shoulder a lot of the, those clutch shots on offense. That's all on Tatum. As far as strengths go, I would say the Celtics have playoff experience. Jason Tatum is an elite talent. They have an elite player on that team. There's a shot, at least in some of these first games, where Tatum will easily be the best player on the floor. If they face the Pacers or the Hornets in the next round. So that's important to have the best player on the court. They have good support in Walker and Smart and Williams and Tristan Thompson and all their guys. The Celtics are capable of beating any team when in rhythm and in sync. The issue is that they're often not in rhythm and in sync. I mean, they're just too volatile. At times, it really feels like Coach Brad Stevens has sort of lost the team. There's no fluidity. If you watch them on offense, they pace down the court. They pass the ball. It's like isolation basketball. There's no movement. There's no passing. It's very interesting to watch when they get cold because it looks like they can't muster any rhyme or reason to score 8 points. Unless Tatum is launching a three. And that happens more often than not. And I think that's what's going to be a real issue against the Wizards tonight, is the Wizards play so fast and they're capable of scoring in bunches and so quickly that I really think that they're going to kind of blow away the Celtics' rhythm. If the Celtics can find any rhythm and if they can find some grit on defense, they certainly have a chance. And it's why they're favored. They're at home. But in short, this is a Celtics team that has, let's see here, a plus 5,000 chance to make it to the finals. While that might seem like good value on a team that has some playoff experience, I don't think it's worth a shot. I think this is one of those bets where the books will be happy just to take your money. And out of the 8 teams that I think are going to be actually in the playoffs after the play-in tournament, I give the Celtics the worst odds of actually making it to the finals. I think they have a 0% chance. But since nothing is a guarantee in sports betting, maybe I'll say 0.5%. But really, it's 0. I don't think they have much of a shot at all. All right, let's move on to the exciting Washington Wizards. So according to SB Nation, this is an interesting stat. Over the past 24 games, the Wizards have a net offensive rating minus defensive rating of plus 5.3 points per 100 possessions. So just to put that into perspective, over those last 24 games, only the Jazz, Clippers, Suns, Bucks, and 76ers were better. Denver was even slightly worse, and we all know how good Denver has been. So this just means that the Wizards have legitimately been one of the best teams in the NBA to end the season. That's true. The amount of points that they score on defense, they're not doing too much. The amount of points that they score on offense, they're not doing too much on defense, but it hasn't really mattered. And, the way that Russell Westbrook is able to facilitate his team, pass the ball around, the way that he's able to rebound. The guy is obviously, probably top 5 athletic talents in the NBA, in the history of the NBA. A pure shooter, a great shooter, no. But when he's, sort of knows his role and he's not launching threes, which I do not think he'll do in this game tonight, he facilitates and manages the rhythm of the Washington offense so well. Players like Hachimura have kind of come out of their, shadow and put up some great games even because Westbrook is there facilitating everything. And he creates holes in defenses. He's quick and, opens up opportunities for other players. So Beal is not going to be completely healthy tonight against the Celtics, but I think he'll do enough. And I think that Russell, especially after, Russell kind of had a bad game against the Hornets. He wasn't scoring a lot. He didn't get that crazy triple-double like he usually does. I think he still got it, but it wasn't insane numbers like usual. I think he'll play even better tonight. I think this game sets up really well for the Wizards. But just to cover the Wizards, so they're first in the NBA in pace. Most of you probably already know that, especially if you've read my articles. That stat has not changed. I think the Bucks and or the Warriors might have taken that spot once or twice, but throughout the season, the Wizards have been the quickest team in the NBA. They score, or they run a 106.4 possessions per game. That's an incredible stat, and it's 2 possessions. It's easily over 2 possessions more than the next team in the Bucks, which just means that they're just light speed. They're third in points per game. They're last in points allowed. That's obviously an issue. They haven't had much defense throughout the year, and it's why they are not going to make it far into the playoffs, but they can really overwhelm teams because of how many points they do score. They're 22nd in point differential, 18th in offensive and defensive efficiency, which is interesting. So offensive and defensive efficiency measures their stats per 100 possessions. So that they allow a lot of points, but per 100 possessions, they're not bad. So they're 18th in defensive efficiency. They are also the 4th best ATS team in the NBA. Of course, those final 23 games had a lot to do with it. They were 17-6 to end the season, but they weren't always at the top of that list. But to finish as one of the best covering teams in the NBA is an impressive stat. Let me see what the exact number is. You want to hear a click here? 57.8%. Not too shabby. So they're not particularly good in any one category, though. Yes, they score a lot of points and they're really fast, but Russ really holds this team up. If you look at the team statistics and rebounds and assists, for example, they're not that high. They're a mid-tier to low-tier team, actually. So that just proves how much individually Russell Westbrook does for this team. They virtually have no chance of winning if he's not in the game these days. The strengths are obviously the dynamic duo of Russ and Bradley Beal. They're one of the best teams to finish the regular season, 17-6, like I said, in the final 26 games. They move at a blinding pace, extremely good offensive output. But where they have their strength on the opposite end is their weakness in defense, because even though they improved somewhat towards the end, they still have a very shallow defensive scheme, inconsistent front court play. When you have a team like the Bucks coming to town and Giannis can just keep on, just assassinating the front court, that's really hard to stop for teams like the Wizards. Bertans and Len are okay, but they're not great big men. They have a weak bench. And obviously there's just too much on Beal and Russ's shoulders. And Beal is not 100%. He still has that hamstring issue. So the bottom line here is I think the Wizards have a 5% chance. I'll give them 5% chance of making the finals. The odds are plus 10,000. If you want to put like $10 on that, why not? Screw it. Fuck it. You might as well. But I don't think that they're going to hang for a long time in the playoffs. Here is an interest. It's interesting though. If they face the Nets, so if they do win tonight, like I think they will, then they become the 7th seed, and they'll face the Nets in the first round. That's a really interesting matchup, because as great as the Nets are on offense, and they also run at a really fast pace, those are two pretty similar teams. The Nets cannot play defense. They're absolutely in the bottom third of the league, of the association, when it comes to points allowed per game and defensive efficiency. So that could just be a really dangerous. If the Wizards win tonight and they face the Nets, that's a dangerous team. Do I think they will beat the Nets in that series? No, I don't. And that's why I'm giving them a 5% chance. I think, especially even if they beat the Nets, which would be, just an amazing storyline, then they're going to have to start facing some really good defenses, whether that's the 76ers or the Knicks or the Heat, even the Bucks can play really, a lot better defense than Brooklyn. But Brooklyn and Washington, that's going to be a hell of a show. Look for a lot of overs in that one, because even though it's the playoffs, it might be lined appropriately for the playoffs and the nerves that come in the playoffs. But these are two teams that just play too fast. So look forward to that. But overall, 5% chance in the Wizards actually making the finals. In other words, they're one of the worst contenders in the Eastern Conference. The 6th seed, the Miami Heat. First of all, let me just say I'm a little biased here. I love the Heat. I'm biased. I love the Heat. I love the energy and the leadership of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. They're old school. You just don't see that anymore. They'll talk shit to you in the middle of a game. They're tough. They're resilient. They know how to play defense. I love how their entire team plays defense. And they come into this game with some experience, right? They come into this playoff scenario with some experience. They were in the finals last year. The question is, was that an aberration? Was that the exception because it was a COVID year and because, I'm pretty sure Jimmy Butler is a single guy and he's a leader of the team and he's not worried about getting home with his family. I mean, it was an interesting scenario last year. Can the same thing repeat this year? I think it could. Do I think it's going to? No, but I think it could. So the Heat have dealt with injuries on and off all year, but they have managed to get that 6th seed, and they're in pretty good position. They'll play the Bucks in the first round of the playoffs, which should be a very interesting matchup. They're 25th in points per game, 5th in points allowed, 16th in point differential, 17th in offensive efficiency, and 7th in defensive efficiency. So, and you probably already know this too if you're a fan of the NBA, the Heat aren't going to overwhelm you or shock you with anything that they do on offense. But they do have great shooters and they can score when they need to. Just most of their games are predicated on how advanced they are on defense. So what are their strengths? Well, they have hard-nosed veteran leadership that works. I already said my piece on Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo's up there too. Great leadership on the court. A great supporting cast with Ariza and Dragic and Robinson and Hero and Iguodala. Too bad Oladipo won't be able to be a part of it this year, after getting surgery. But this is a team that has a lot of camaraderie, and that goes a long way in the playoffs, especially in the NBA where you have multiple games to win a series. That resiliency, that toughness, knowing how to play together, knowing how to overcome opponents. They did it last year and went all the way to the NBA Finals. They lost to the Lakers, but that was a significant accomplishment for a team that a lot of people did not believe in. They do have clutch shooters in Jimmy Butler. Tyler Hero can definitely make shots in the clutch, although a little less featured this year off the bench. But they have icy veins, man. This is not a team that's afraid of the big moment, and that intangible can make a big difference in the playoffs. I don't have to tell you that. It's the reason why teams in a lot of sports. It's the reason why the Lakers are, again, very dangerous. It's the reason why the Patriots were dangerous for so many years, even if they didn't excel as well in the regular season, which they mostly did. When you got to the playoffs and you have Brady behind center and that coaching staff, that they've been there before, they're resilient, they're tough, whereas a lot of teams buckle under pressure. We've seen that before from Milwaukee. Too focused, too dependent on Giannis. I could absolutely see the Heat beating the Bucks. More to come on that when I talk about the Bucks. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but the Heat are a tough team and a dangerous team. And the kind of defense they play is not, it's not something that a lot of teams in the East are going to be able to match. The weaknesses heading into the playoffs are just that, right? Their offense. We already know it's not exceptional. It doesn't blow anybody away. They dropped games against the really good teams, the elite teams this year, the Jazz, the Nets, the 76ers. Can they win in the big games? Can they sustain the kind of toughness and resiliency that we've seen from them? Or was last year just the exception? Was that COVID year the year where a team as tough and resilient as the Heat can make it that far? I don't know. Overall, I'll give the Heat a 15% chance to make it to the finals. That's out of a lot of respect for what they did last year. And again, I feel like I'm saying this word over and over again, but they're an extremely tough team to just knock out. They're going to hang in games. They're going to score just enough. They're going to play great defense. They can really clamp down at the end of games in defense. So 15% chance to make the finals. They are not my favorite to make the finals, obviously, but I think they're worth maybe a tiny sprinkle. They are plus 1,200 to make the NBA Finals, which again is kind of the book showing them the same respect that I am showing them too, because that's far from the last place team, the lowest odds. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks. So the Hawks are a very balanced team. They won't shock you or overwhelm you in any one category, but they're well coached and they have a few weak spots for sure. Probably, I would say the Hawks are like the sneakiest team that enter the playoffs because they're very quiet. I mean, that's a great spot in the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. They can beat it feels like they can beat any team in the NBA at times when they all play really well together. They're well coached. They're almost maxed effort in every game, and of course they'll contend with the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs, 4th versus 5th seeds. So that's a really interesting matchup for two teams that probably didn't think that they would be in this position to start the year. One thing you have to talk about when you talk about the Atlanta Hawks is Clint Capella and what he's done this year for that team. I mean, what a sensational year for him. 15.2 points per game, and that probably doesn't jump off the page, but he averages 14.3 rebounds a game. He is a Hawk in the front court. He's a monster in the front court. I mean, if you look at any of the Hawks games on the season, he'll almost always be leading not only his team but the entire game in rebounds. 16, 18, 23, 19, 12, 17. I mean, they're almost always in double digits, and he does a fantastic job giving his team more opportunities, plenty of offensive rebounds as well as defensive rebounds, and just maintaining his spot and playing good, disciplined front court basketball. So he's a difference maker. A lot of these teams in the playoffs, as I keep speaking to, I mean, really besides the 76ers, don't have fantastic front court presence. And the Hawks, with Clint Capella at least, are one of those teams that could really give other teams problems if they are sticking to their assignments and rebounding the way that they always do. And Clint Capella is such a huge part of that. Trae Young is obviously a dynamic shooter as well. Can make any shot from around the court. The young buck is averaging 25.3 points per game and 9.4 assists per game, which is a stat that kind of jumped out to me. I didn't know he was almost averaging 10 assists a game. That's pretty awesome. Stats for him on the year. So on the Hawks overall as a team, they're 13th overall in points per game, 12th in points allowed. It kind of speaks to that mid-tier, well-balanced team that I was talking about in the beginning. They're 9th in point differential, so they're a top 10 team in point differential. That's impressive. They're 9th in turnover ratio. They don't turn the ball over very much. They're 6th in rebound rate. Of course, a lot of that is the Capella effect. They're 8th in offensive efficiency, so top 10 in offensive efficiency as well, and then 19th in defensive efficiency. And I would just say sort of more of what I already have. I mean, their strengths are their young talent like Trae Young. Clint Capella is doing an amazing job in the front court. Bogdanovic can really step up when they need him to. Also averaging plenty of points on the year. Collins and Lou Williams, who half the time comes off the bench, or sometimes he starts, but it's a solid all-around team. Their bench lacks depth past those names that I mentioned, but they're well coached. They've played way better since Coach Lloyd Pierce was fired. Nate McMillan doing a great job with his team, and like I said, I think that front court could really make a difference here in the playoffs. Now they're facing the Knicks in the first round, and the Knicks are not, are no joke in that era as well, led by Julius Randle. But the Hawks are an interesting team, and it's really hard to get a grasp fully on them. They're one of the more mysterious teams to me, only because they're consistent in that they obviously win most of their games, but they don't overwhelm and they don't always cover. So they're a tough team to handicap. The weakness is, you always have that experience factor. They haven't been in this position very much. A lot of young players on their team. Who's going to take the big shot at the end of the game? I guess it's Trae Young, but he's not all that seasoned in the category. I mean, who is the leader of the team? That could be a problem. Is it Clint Capella? Is it Trae Young? Is it somebody else? Is it Lou Williams off the bench? Hasn't really been, at least from what I've seen, there hasn't been somebody who jumps off the screen as their clear leader who's kind of facilitating everybody and talking everyone through things. But they play really well as a team, and that's worth noting. To me, it just feels like the Hawks are still one piece away from becoming a really dangerous threat in the playoffs. Their odds are plus 2,800 to make it to the finals. I'm going to give them an 8% chance to actually make the finals. So I do give the Heat at the 6th seed a better chance, even though they're facing the Bucks in the first round, which sucks because the Bucks, I think, are kind of pissed, coming into the playoffs at 3rd. But still, a lot of these teams, I think, are more formidable than the Hawks. And while 8% isn't saying it's impossible, I still think they're one piece away. They lack the playoff experience, and they're not that overwhelming. And there's a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference that have just overwhelming components to who they are. Really fast-paced, really electric offenses, really stifling and amazing defensive effort. So we'll see what happens here with the Hawks. I wouldn't be surprised, if this was a really tough, hard-fought series between the Knicks and the Hawks, but I just don't give the Hawks a great chance of making it to the finals. All right, moving on to the fourth seed. It is the New York Basketball Knicks. What a story they have, huh? Julius Randle. I love them. I'm also a little biased about them because Julius Randle, a mentee of Kobe, has taken on that mentality. He's old school. He's at the gym at 3 a.m. That kind of leadership, implicit and explicit that he does on and off the court and in those off hours speaks volumes to who the Knicks are and who they have become. Tom Thibodeau doing a great job too at kind of defining that they're going to be a defensive team, a tough team, a max effort team, and we've seen that from them all year. They don't rest their players. They don't take any unnecessary time off. If anything, they have like a Michael Jordan late 80s, early 90s mentality, and I love to see it. Do I think that the Knicks are still a piece or two away, just like the Hawks? I do. But I think, the Knicks have so much to celebrate this year alone to make the fourth seed, which means against any of those lower seeds, they're going to have the home court advantage. The first game is going to be at Madison Square Garden. That's amazing, and it's an amazing success story in of itself. The Knicks do a lot of things really well, but obviously the most glaring is that they're one of the best defenses in all of the NBA. I would say another glaring thing is that they have one of the most improved players, one of the players to take the biggest leap in the NBA in Julius Randle. He's scoring 24.1 points per game. And not far behind him, R.J. Barrett, I would say, has taken maybe second or third most significant leap of any player in the NBA. Second year in, there's just a major confidence difference that I see in R.J. Barrett. Not afraid to take the big shots, not afraid to infiltrate and attack that front court. He's becoming a better and a more confident player, and you'll love to see that for the Knicks. They're 26th overall in points per game, so not great, but they don't usually have to do a lot because they're first in points allowed. So that leaves them at top 10, 10th in 10th in point differential. They're fourth in defensive efficiency, 22nd in offensive efficiency. No surprise there. They are a top 10 team in turnover ratio as well. They don't turn the ball over a lot. They don't make a lot of mistakes. And they are last in the NBA in pace. And to a lot of NBA teams, especially how fast and how scoring-centric and like long ball-centric the NBA has become, that's a really shocking pace for any NBA team to be a part of. And the Knicks do that. They do it really well. It's a really cerebral attack. It's really slow. It causes other teams to not be able to establish any sort of rhythm. And that's really difficult, especially if you're high-scoring teams like the Wizards or the Nets or the Bucks in the Eastern Conference. It could be a difference maker. Do I think that the Knicks are going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals? No, and you'll see what my percentages, my percentage chances are for that here in a little bit. But it cannot be understated in a fast-paced league like the NBA with how calculated and slow the Knicks are and how great they are on defense. That really throws off a lot of the rhythm. And it's a rhythm offensive league, right? Long balls, quick shots. A lot of teams can't handle that. And that's their strength. Now the question for this team, the weakness for the team, is are they going to be able to stifle or limit the great offenses in the Eastern Conference when you have great offenses like the Nets with their big three, Harden is back, 76ers with Simmons and Embiid and Harris and all the scorers they have on that team, the Bucks with Giannis just dominating and infiltrating the front court, but also he's got a ton of talent around him too. Let's not sell Milwaukee short just because they're too Giannis dependent. So the Knicks are really going to have to be able to score in big moments. There's going to be a lot of Derrick Rose moments probably. Julius Randle. We've seen what they're able to do against great teams. I love the game that they had against the Clippers. arguably the best pure shooting team in the NBA. A lot of the stats show that, especially from beyond the arc. And the Knicks were able to slow down that game, force them into difficult shots. If they can do that against these Eastern Conference teams, they have a real shot at making it further than people give them credit for. But do I think that they're going to make it to the finals and overcome that? Ultimately, I do not. The Knicks have a plus 3,500 chance of making the finals. I'll give them a 12% chance at making the finals. So a little less respect than the Heat, just because the Heat have been here before. It is not impossible, but I don't think that they're going to get there. All right, let's talk about that crazy team from Milwaukee that has, is he the best player in the NBA? I don't know. He's up there. The reigning MVP, Giannis. I don't say his last name usually because I always mess it up, but you know who he is. The Greek Freak. He has suffered some time off this year, but he's got some thigh issues, hip, ankle, but should be 100% for the playoffs. And obviously the Bucks are not going to win. They cannot win if they don't have him 100%. That's their single greatest weakness, is that they're overly dependent on Giannis. And Chris Middleton and the supporting cast don't always hold up the team in his absence. The Bucks are first in points per game, 22nd in points allowed. That took a dip towards the end of the year. They're actually a pretty good defense, but they've just, they preferred to play at a fast pace, and Giannis was injured on and off, and they were just allowing more points than usual. But overall, third in point differential, so not too shabby when it's all said and done. 10th in defensive efficiency, 6th in offensive efficiency. You can see just how complete of a team they are based on that stat. They're second overall in pace, only to the Wizards. Milwaukee, especially at home, just plays with such a fast pace, and they love to push the ball with Giannis. As we all know, all he needs is like 3 steps from half court to get to the rim. It's just insane. So he's able to really stretch the floor for them. They're also third in rebounding rate and second in effective field goal percentage. This is a really well-balanced team. And I know that I'm constantly stating how over-dependent they are on Giannis, which is true. But they do have a really good supporting cast. They're just a little bit inconsistent. So, Middleton, DiVincenzo, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, PJ Tucker. I mean, they definitely have the cast around Giannis to play lockdown defense, to score points, to get perimeter shots in. It's just a matter of, are they seasoned enough at this point, experienced enough, resilient enough to hold up the Bucks team when Giannis has an off night or an off quarter? Because against these teams in the Eastern Conference, the Bucks could get behind quick, with the way that these teams score. Or they could fall behind quick because of the way these teams play defense, and then they're not able to keep up. So the Bucks, they're a little banged up. Chris Middleton is a little banged up, but overall, they're such a complete team. They're such a well-balanced team, and they're certainly capable of getting far in the playoffs. This could be Giannis' year. I'm going to give them a 15% chance, or the same chance that the Heat have. This is an experienced team. This is a tough team. This is a team that has a top 3 player. Let's just say top 3, maybe top 5, maybe, but a top 3 overall player in the NBA as far as how he's able to play offense and defense. And what are the odds on the Bucks? The odds have a plus 350 chance to make the finals. So you're seeing those odds go way up here in these last 3 Eastern Conference contenders. So we'll see what happens. I think it's unlikely that they do reach the playoffs, just because in the 3rd spot it's just going to be a little more treacherous to get there. If they beat the Heat, which is not going to be an easy series for the Bucks, then they're going to have to go on and probably face, since it's unlikely that the Nets are going to lose their first series, which I think will be against the Wizards, that would mean that the Bucks are going to have to face the Nets in the second round of the playoffs. So they're going to have to realistically go through the Nets and the 76ers to get to the finals. Those are obviously the 2 top teams in the East for a reason, and I don't see it happening. So a 15% chance for the Bucks. Part of me wants Giannis to finally get there, because he's a good kid, and just an astronomical talent. But I don't think this is their year, and I think they might still be missing a piece too, missing a supporting cast piece that could really take the Bucks to the next level. All right, let's move on and talk about the always controversial Brooklyn Nets. I guess I'll be honest with you guys. I mean, and you probably know this if you read my articles or have listened to this podcast before, is I don't love the Nets. I find them annoying. I know Kyrie has big goals and aspirations outside of basketball, and I think those are commendable, but I don't think it's a good sign when you're openly telling reporters and your team who's listening to the things you say in the media that basketball is not your priority. Call it what you want, but the best players in the NBA in the history of the NBA are killers, and it's because they put the game of basketball first. Kobe, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, they pursued great things after basketball. Sometimes a little bit during basketball, but not really, right? Basketball was their main focus. Kyrie, not solely focused on basketball. Kevin Durant, probably pound for pound, the best player in the National Basketball Association, but he could be a crybaby, he could be emotional. The addition of James Harden, though, who looks crisp once again, looks as good as ever, off of injury, off the bench. This is a dangerous team. Whether I like him or not, the Nets have a big three, maybe like we've never seen before, or at least since the Warriors and their heyday with the Kevin Durant. But this is a dangerous team who, whether I like it or not, could make it all the way to the finals and could win the finals. The odds tell us that. They're plus 105 to make the finals, plus 230 to win it. So the books like them as the representative from the Eastern Conference. I don't, and I'll touch upon that when I talk about the 76ers. But let's take a little look at the Brooklyn Nets. So they're on a 5-game winning streak currently entering the playoffs, so that's good. They were on a little bit of a losing streak there at the beginning of May, but they recovered, 5-game winning streak entering the playoffs. They're second in points per game, that's no mystery. 21st in points allowed, and 21st in defensive efficiency. So that's not good. And I haven't looked at the stats, but I know I've heard anecdotally on podcasts like Colin Cowherd's podcast on The Herd and others that I don't think there's ever been a team as bad as the Nets who have actually won the NBA championship. So we'll see if that stands. It's a changing of the guard for sure in all sports. There's just more offense. But 21st on defense and in points allowed, I don't know. They're 7th in point differential, 1st in offensive efficiency. That's not a surprise. They're 4th in assist ratio, so there's a lot of assists, a lot of passing, a lot of great dynamic offensive teamwork. They're also 1st in effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage. So the strengths of the Nets are obvious, right? They have arguably 3 of the best players in the NBA all on one team, maybe number 1 and number 2 in Durant and Harden. And especially as far as scoring goes, I mean, the ability for Kyrie to pass the ball, Durant and Harden are exceptional passers of the ball as well, and for all of them to be able to score and dribble around anyone in the court, when all 3 of them are playing, it's not shocking that they're at times seems like an unstoppable team. They're really fast-paced. They're really tough to stop when everyone is healthy, and they just score more than you can control. Right? I mean, for a team that has that many proficient shooters, world-class shooters, and plays at that pace, and there seems to be some chemistry between the 3 of them. I think they're all kind of similar, right? They're not the most liked NBA players. They'll go on social media. They'll say things that are off-putting. Maybe that kind of rallies them all together. I don't know. But that being said, the weakness is that they haven't had a lot of time to play together. Harden's been injured on and off. Lord knows Durant's been injured on and off, or he'll just sit, or Kyrie will just sit. But they certainly have the players on their team between Blake Griffin, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he can make shots from the outside. He still has moments where he can play some defense, and control the front court somewhat. Although against this Eastern Conference slate of teams, I don't know how adept he's going to be at that. But they haven't had a time, even though there's a bunch of stars, they haven't had a lot of time to play together. So how much chemistry, how much fluidity is there on this team? And they're extremely weak on defense. And that's no mystery, but it's true when you have other teams coming to town, like the 76ers, like the Bucks, even like the Knicks. I mean, could the Knicks be able to keep up with the Nets if they face them in the playoffs, because they play such exceptional defense, and the Nets are just going to let them score, right? A lot of teams can score on the Nets. I mean, that's why you're 21st in points allowed. So with a plus 230 chance to win it all and plus 105 chance to make the finals, according to Bovada, and it's probably similar in most books, I'll give them a 20% chance to make the finals. That's my second highest percentage of all the teams. It's undeniable how talented they are. It's undeniable how annoying they are. But at the end of the day, if all three of the big three stay healthy, the Nets could easily be in the NBA Finals and probably forcing whoever their opponent is into just really tough situations with that amount of talent on their team. Last but not least, we will talk about the number one team in the Eastern Conference in the Philadelphia 76ers, and in my opinion, they have really earned it. Joel Embiid has been out for a significant portion of this year. He was putting up MVP numbers at the start of the year, and he still finished with great numbers. He finished with 28.5 points per game and 10.6 rebounds per game. A defensive and offensive force indeed. And the 76ers, they've been resilient as resilient as a team could be with all the ups and downs of their season. Tobias Harris has been out in spurts. Ben Simmons has been out here and there, although probably the most consistent player. I know a lot of people hate on Ben Simmons, but from what you hear anecdotally from like sideline reporters or just people at games, is the guy he's a giant human being who he just moves way quicker than he should. And I think humbly, he's learned, because people were saying at the beginning, hey, this could be the next LeBron James. So maybe he needed to come off that pedestal a little bit. I think he's learning who he is in the 76ers lineup and how he can contribute best. He's a fantastic defender, probably their best player on defense on the 76ers, and great at rebounding, great passer. Usually takes the point guard position and really moves the ball and is able to facilitate the ball for Philadelphia. So I know he's never going to be the pure shooter that people want him to be. I mean, I think ever since Michael Jordan, we just had this image of what a great shooter should look like. And next to Kobe Bryant, I mean, no one's going to really look like Michael Jordan. Just like no one's going to look like Steph Curry. I mean, these are once in a generation talents. So Ben Simmons is not going to be that, but he's fantastic, and he fits into his role with the 76ers great. So the number one team in the East, and let's take a little look at their profile here. So they're 49-23, and again, that was largely without their full lineup for most of the year, so that's a really impressive record. And also, let's make a note here: the Eastern Conference is not a pushover anymore. I mean, with the Nets and the Bucks and the upcoming teams like the Knicks and the Heat were in the finals last year. These aren't the years of the Cleveland Cavaliers-led Eastern Conference. When LeBron was over there, it's different and it's more challenging. So kudos to the Sixers for getting through all that. The Sixers are one of the most complete and well-balanced teams in the NBA. They are second in defensive efficiency, 12th in offensive efficiency, 9th in rebounding rate, 6th in points allowed, 14th in points per game, 5th in point differential. So, some of those numbers don't jump off the page on offense, but clearly when they have a completely healthy lineup, when Simmons is there, Harris is there, and Lord knows when Joel Embiid is there, along with their supporting cast, this is a team that can score points. They might not score points consistently the way the Nets and the Wizards and teams like that do, but there's no... I don't think anyone's concerned or overly worried about their ability to score points. And what they're able to do on defense, they've been consistently a top 2, top 3 team on defense all year. I think that's probably the biggest difference that really separates them from a lot of these other teams, is while their offense may go up and down a little bit, I mean, it's very consistent, but it go up and down a little bit, Their defense has been extremely consistent all year, been able to limit teams like the Nets, like the Wizards, like some of those Western Conference teams that can score a ton of points. And I think that's what really separates the Sixers here. It's hard to find a weakness on the Sixers. They're just a really well-balanced team. I guess if there would be one entering the playoffs, like what is the one thing that stands out? There could be a flaw or some kind of weakness about Philly. Is, they've been in these big spots before. We think about the Raptors and that unbelievable last-second shot by Kawhi. I mean, the Sixers probably should have been in the finals that year, but they kind of allow teams to stick around, and they don't always have the most clutch. Like I don't know if I think about Embiid as the most clutch shooter in the NBA. He's a great shooter, right? He's really developed that turnaround jumper. Obviously, his field goal percentage is always awesome because of the way that he dominates the front court, but can he make those clutch shots? And then if he doesn't make those clutch shots, who's going to? Is it going to be Tobias Harris? Is it going to be Ben Simmons? Is it going to be Seth Curry? And someone's going to have to, really take that leadership role. And I think Embiid is the team's leader. I mean, maybe Simmons is more functionally, but people look to Embiid, obviously, as the lead scorer and everything. Is he ready for that big moment? Because it's probably going to happen, right? I mean, when you're going up against teams like the Nets, who have the big three, or like Milwaukee, who have Giannis, who are so offensively talented, they're going to challenge you. And they're going to be able to probably win some games in these series just according to their offense, regardless of how well they play defense. So are the Sixers going to be able to keep pace, and are they going to be able to make those clutch shots? In my opinion, the way that they maintain their first place position in the Eastern Conference all year, a lot of that through their unbelievable defense, but also all their skilled players and people stepping up. I think it's created even more chemistry. I think they finally have an exceptional coach in Doc Rivers. I don't know if they win the finals, but to me this is the year that the 76ers make the NBA Finals with the most complete team. I can't wait to see, probably going to be Brooklyn versus Philly. I can't wait to see them overwhelm and overcome the Nets, especially if they flex a little on defense. I love that. I love the idea of that narrative. And at plus 300 to make the NBA Finals, I think that's a best bet as far as the future goes. To make the NBA Finals, I'm willing to put down at least one unit on the 76ers to make it all the way there. They're getting reduced price because the Nets are getting that, first place treatment, really. So this is the one bet out of all the finals bets that I'm actually going to put my money on. The Philadelphia 76ers to make the finals at plus 300. I wish we can get a better price. If you got it earlier in the season, that was a better bet. But now, looking forward in the playoffs, I like the Sixers to make the finals, and I'll give them a 25% chance of getting there. All right, so I put out my free picks article at the Odds Breakers, so I do have some thoughts on tonight's game. It is Tuesday, May 18th. I'll have another podcast about the Western Conference playoffs tomorrow, or Western Conference playoffs preview. I'll be rating all these teams the same way. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to wrap this up because we took a long time here today. But I hope you enjoyed the content, and I provided a good foundation for you to watch the NBA playoffs. I do like the Wizards tonight, I'll just say that, even though I said that in my article. Read the article for the other picks that I like. And until tomorrow's podcast, let's win some damn money. See ya!